his mind's at that moment,
right,
and what's happening in the world. And it's very clear that he's a very progressive person.
Well, I mean, that's a given, I think, considering the topic and that he's a married gay man.
Right.
The other episode I was going to suggest, but it's not one of the ones that we went with, and I think the two we chose were just right. The reason I had chose my other, which was 109, is it was the episode he recorded right after the passage of Prop 8.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a very political episode. Obviously, it was very animated by anger and frustration and disappointment after the passage of Prop 8. And it's made a lot of top 10s as like greatest episodes of all time.
Sure, I can see that as the vitriol would be flowing
Absolutely.
freely.
And, unless you are very conservative in your views, it felt like very righteous anger and disappointment.
Sure.
Particularly for our mostly progressive state. It was, I know it was shocking to me at the time. And of course it only passed by a hair's breadth and was later deemed to be unconstitutional.
And a lot of external money from the Mormon Church in Utah.
Well, there was a lot of anger towards the Mormon Church.
Yeah.
Having said that, and we welcome all our listeners from the Church of Latter-day Saints, although I'm guessing you've probably tuned out at this point.
Yeah.
But if you haven't yet, you might very well after we begin talking about episode 582. Doug, what did you think of this episode? And would you like a reminder on the calls from Brandon, who came wildly prepared today?
And also the preamble that you've tried to skip again.
So
come on, John.
Which preamble, Brandon?
Where he talks about the 7 words banned by the CDC.
Well, since we just began talking about 582, I wouldn't say we've skipped anything yet. Let's talk about it.
Because we can't jump into the calls until you talk about the preamble.
Brandon, this show's
John,
a fucking mess. We can take it however we want.
No.
Brandon, you clearly want to, and it was a great opener with George Carlin. Yes,
it was, but there was also something before that.
Which was?
Which was his political commentary.
Well, not for 582.
I have it on my notes from 582.
Well, tell me what you have on
582
your
does
notes.
open with him saying there was one album we couldn't listen to that my parents had as kids.
Okay, so then
It could be the other episode.
No, I have it on my notes.
There's one where he talks about the midterms. Oh, this is great for the listeners.
I was going to say, this is fantastic.
This is what they
content
want.
for anybody listening.
Us arguing
instead
around
of
the
us,
table.
Instead of us,
No, I do recall the 7 words, but I just thought there was one brief intro.
So jump into what was it that stands out in your mind?
So this is all that it stands out in my mind is that he has this political, and he refers to it himself later as a rant.
Right.
And I agree. I didn't write rant in my notes because I thought it was a very thought out statement, that he made. But at the time I was thinking, well, this seems a little out of place for this podcast.
Right.
Based on what the rest of the content is.
Because you're saying it's about sex and love and not politics.
Yeah, and it was a very heavy political comment. And then he moved right into George Carlin.
Right.
In my mind, that's all it is in my notes, and that's what I recall. And then my note on it later was, I like that he made the callback to it at the end of the podcast. By the way,
was this about the midterm elections?
I don't know. I didn't write that down.
Okay. If it was definitely episode 419, the one we were previously talking about, because that was November of 2014.
Right.
So that would be, midterm of
I remember that.
Obama's
I remember
term.
that as well, but I feel like this was a separate thing at the beginning of
could
582.
Be.
Maybe we can check it later.
Quick note. We all occasionally make mistakes, and Doug did here. The episode does indeed begin immediately with reference to the George Carlin bit. Was there
just for our own.
Something that stood out about it, or just that, wow, that was really political and I expected love, sex, relationships?
Yes, and especially coming out of 419 and then going into 582 and then having this commentary about politics, and it was slightly hostile, but again, the only thing that bothered me was that I thought it was out of place.
Okay.
At the end of the podcast, he makes a callback to it about, hey, and if you enjoyed my political rant at the beginning of this episode, then you would probably enjoy my other podcast,
right?
Which I thought was great because at the time that I heard it, all I thought was, wow, this seems like it belongs on a different podcast.
Right.
And so he made that callback, which for me said, okay, that's fine then. I don't mind what he was saying at the beginning. Not that I objected to it anyway, but I meant just as far as content goes.
Sure. So he was giving you a little taste of his more political side and saying, hey, if you like it, Brandon, am I right? Is it called Blabbermouth?
I actually don't know his other political podcast.
I think it's either Blabber or Blabbermouth.
Yeah.
But it seems like he starts every Saturday, because I listen to a few episodes of the Savage Love podcast, and it seems like every episode starts with something that is political and seems to be related to relationship or status of people, so that it kind of bleeds into, like, to a degree, he talked about the CDC ban words.
All right, I'm going to rattle them off. I hope you're sitting down. Smelling salts handy. Here we go. Diversity, fetus, science-based, vulnerable, evidence-based, transgender, entitlement, and tits. No, actually, no tits. Tits didn't make the list, but diversity, fetus, science-based, vulnerable, evidence-based, transgender, entitlement did.
So arguably, that's both political and, as is
Right.
often the case with any kind of, political or legislative decision that then affects real people in their private lives. It is both sexual and personal. I mean, when we talk about transgender being a banned word.
Right.
So go into the kind of parallel he created regarding, from different eras and for different reasons, banned words. Hit us with that, Brandon.
Right, and so he talks about the growing up with George Carlin, and that TV was this big place for the way to receive information, and that you have these banned words that kind of change the way that
This famous Carlin bit, the seven words you can't say on
which
TV.
I'm not going to say them because they're very dirty. Do you
Right.
know them, John, off the top of your head?
I want to say fuck, shit, cunt, cocksucker. Am I right so far?
Yes.
Because that's 4. Fuck, shit, cunt, cocksucker, pussy, tits?
Motherfucker.
Motherfucker.
And tits.
Okay, motherfucker and tits. So these were the words you couldn't say, and he says there's 400,000 plus words
Right, in the English language, but
English,
these seven
have been set aside. And the reason that Dan Savage decided to open with that bit and this reference to this album from the 70s that he and his siblings could listen to every other album his parents had except that one album by George Carlin, even though he says maybe by prohibiting it, our parents were actually using reverse psychology to get us to listen to it. It certainly worked for Dan Savage,
Right.
who's run full bore into, and maybe we'll play a clip or two to give you an idea of just how open he is and explicit when he's discussing sexuality with his callers.
He really gets explicit. I mean, as soon as he's like, we love sucking dicks and fucking each other's butts, and I was like, oh, okay, this guy likes to party.
He did say almost exactly that.
I was so
in
shocked.
582. He's like, I can suck your. Well, let's let Dan Savage do it. Here's the clip.
And then he can suck my fucking dick, or I can suck his fucking dick, or we can fuck each other's butts.
So that gives you an idea again, and that's completely fine. And he jumps into this rant about the famous 7 words you can't say on TV because at that time in 2017, when that 582 was recorded, very nearly the end of the year, December 19th, there had been out of the Trump White House that we're all
President Trump.
living under at the moment,
The
right?
Cheeto in chief, as I call him.
No, you're talking about the orange buffoon there?
Yeah.
Mhm. So, anywho, that there was a list of words, and of course they didn't necessarily want, this was not released to the public, but it turned out that they had a list of words that they did not want the CDC saying. It's insane, considering that fact-based and science-based are 2 of the words.
Right.
That's why, if you are a listener, it may differ from many of us sitting around the table, that is in support of the Trump, you're listening in the present day. This isn't some future time where we all look back on the Trump presidency and simply ask, how did this happen and how did you allow it to happen? But you're currently living under it and agree with it now. I know and I can only speak for me. I will not speak for Doug and Brandon.
Don't speak for me.
They absolutely have their own microphones to speak for themselves. But you can straight go fuck yourself and stop listening to this podcast.
Yeah, don't you just
stop listening.
feel
to us
free
right
to
now.
move to Russia or whatever you want to fucking do. Get out of
Whatever
my
you
country.
want to do. But anyway,
Anyway.
tell us a little bit about this, Brando.
About the CDC. I mean,
Yeah.
just a little bit left before we can jump into the calls. But basically, the idea is that he was rallying against the idea that the big danger was that Republicans, because of the way that they could be triggered, to use a term that's kind of a hot button word, they could react against anybody who's doing these studies that had findings that use these kind of terms or maybe enforce values that they didn't agree with. And he found, and I think that that's why he starts every episode with a political comment, is because he's trying to push against people marginalizing the already marginalized.
Right.
I think that's the big thing for, because he has a lot of, I noticed a lot of the phone calls start with, I'm a blank from wherever and I'm queer.
They do indeed.
I'm a blank from
We're
wherever
a
and I'm bisexual.
Poly-bi couple living in the
like
Midwest.
a lot of people identify themselves, and a lot of them are marginal.
Heterosexual female.
And people kind of like buy into that. And so I think one of it kind of rallies the base, right? At the
Just
top of
for
the
our
show.
listeners, in case I was confusing, I, John, am not a cis heterosexual female. I just realized that may have been confusing when I said it.
John, I don't think anybody can hear your voice and think
That I'm a
you
cis
are
female, right?
a cis heterosexual female.
Sure. Anyway,
knows
go
what-
on. I just wanted to be clear on that one.
But
The listeners are still learning about us.
I think
Thank
there's
you.
some listeners maybe sitting at this table who have no idea what you just said.
excellent.
Okay, so
no, we
wow,
can't get into
that's
this. We
it.
can't get into
Another
this.
episode. Let's go on.
Yeah, this will be homework for Doug.
Right.
Or not.
But anyway, so I think that
Doug, be
leads
open-minded.
into the phone calls, which is that Dan Savage really does kind of prompt people while listening that this is going to be something that's political. This is going to be something that
Sure.
that is going to be about people that are not just straight people from wherever talking about their marriage problems. You're going to get gays and transgenders and all kinds of people from all different walks of life. And I think that's why it's really important that he sets it up like the most recent episode was about the the Kavanaugh nomination.
Sure.
And so it's very clear that he's saying, like, I'm going to push buttons. You guys got to be ready, because if you don't like it, then you're going to be upset.
And again, I can't imagine any wildly conservative people who have their fingers crossed and are currently watching Fox News repeatedly saying to themselves, I hope Kavanaugh becomes a Supreme Court justice. I hope they're probably not listening to the show.
Dan Savage said that he wants Kavanaugh to be confirmed because he thinks that he has a very good chance of being impeached if he was actually put on the court.
That is,
But that's neither here nor there, and that's not the episodes we're covering.
But that's simply a circuitous method of getting someone to not be on the Supreme Court.
Correct.
Is to first hope that they get on, then hope that they get removed.
His thought was that we know that this guy has so much baggage that he'd be, rather than anybody else who Trump may push up as the
Sure.
next option where we couldn't do this kind of digging. But again, let's move on to the questions, because I've
Sure.
taken us on a circuitous route through this podcast.
Well, I mean, I think this is important. One thing we've discussed today is that the sexual is often political and the political is often
Indeed.
sexual. So,
especially for Michelle Bachmann's husband.
absolutely.
Honey!
That's true. That guy, talk about a cis male who's super hetero.
Super.
Yep. Doug, what did you think of episode 582?
I would say I felt about the same as 419. I thought it was good.
Was there a caller that jumped out to you? Was there a question that jumped out to you?
Actually, no. I'm going to say not.
Okay.
But I still thought it was good. I thought everything.
Right.
But Brandon can refresh me on the calls. I think
Brando,
maybe
hit us with the
because-
callers from 582.
Sure. The first caller is a dad who's worried his wife is going to meet. She's going to meet a man. They're in an
Oh,
open
yeah, that
relationship.
was
She's
interesting.
gonna
Oh,
fly.
that one. The open.
That was
Right,
a
so
tough one for
they're
me.
a poly
They have-
relationship.
Yes.
with children living in
Yeah.
the mom's
Living
mom's
at the parents'
house.
Right.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So, Doug, in general,
Yes.
polyamory has become more and more popular enough that a caller can just throw out, we're a poly couple, the same way that someone might say we're a monogamous couple, because it really is the flip side to that.
Right.
What do you think of that? A guy's been married for almost 30 years. What are you feeling? Again, you're a liberal, open-minded guy. I know you're okay with other people doing that. Is that something you'd ever be comfortable with?
No, I'm not. I'm firmly against anything outside the marriage.
Okay.
So I have no problem with somebody.
And you mean in your own marriage, or you mean for everybody?
I'm going to say for everybody.
Okay.
Interesting.
This
Okay.
is my opinion is that if you are married to someone, they are your life partner.
Okay.
If you want to have relationships with multiple people, fantastic. Just don't get married.
Okay.
Right. But now, do you think that people could still get married and at the start know that they are going to be allowed to have relations outside of marriage? What is it about marriage to you that makes it so that it has to stay within the marriage, even if both partners are like, you know what, we're going into this knowing that we might want to sleep with other people?
Then why get married?
For for financial and other reasons. There's healthcare is one thing that you can get through,
Which doesn't apply anymore.
Not necessarily,
because
there's
you can have
some places where workplaces will only recognize married partners. You couldn't just be a person living with somebody else, because I couldn't get on Maria's insurance until we were married.
Okay.
Well, let's start with this. Regardless of the kind of administrative